Good morning and welcome to Redesigning HR for the New World of Work Bootcamp 1, Redesigning Talent Acquisition in partnership with KPMG. My name is Marion Robinson and I am the Chief Growth Officer at PageUp. This webinar will run for 50 minutes with the ability to ask questions via the chat facility located at the bottom on your screen. We will also be running some polls throughout the session and would appreciate your participation to assist with our research. Redesigning HR for the New World of Work is a series of 3 webinars delivered in a bootcamp format. In this 3-part bootcamp series, PageUp combines leading research with practical suggestions to provide insights and tools for HR practitioners. Hear from thought leaders and HR directors, gather ideas, share experiences, and ask questions. Today is Bootcamp 1, Redesigning Talent Acquisition. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters. Sylvia Vorhauser-Smith, Senior Vice President of Global Research at PageUp, and Phil Rutherford, Head of Talent Acquisition, People Performance and Culture at KPMG. Let me tell you a bit more about Sylvia. Sylvia is an international speaker on applied neuroscience, talent management, and human capital management. She is a featured contributor to Forbes magazine, a member of the Australian Human Resources Institute, ARI, HR Tech Advisory Panel, author of numerous white papers on talent management, and co-author of the books Talented Southeast Asia, Talented Philippines, and Cliffhanger, HR on the Precipice and the Future of Work. Welcome, Sylvia.
Hi, Mary. Great to be here.
Phil joined KPMG Australia in November 2016 and is responsible for graduate, experienced and partner talent acquisition, covering KPMG's 14 offices nationally across all business lines. Phil is passionate about KPMG's talent acquisition function, being closely aligned to the strategic growth and innovation-focused direction of the firm, with particular emphasis on identifying culturally and experiential diverse talent with the right skills and experience for the future. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you, Mary.
Phil, it's such an interesting topic, so important at this stage, talent acquisition, and not just talent acquisition itself, but also the redesign of talent acquisition processes. I know you've been doing a lot of work in that space. I'm really looking forward to you sharing some of your experiences today.
Please do. Thank you.
Great. Today's program will be a 5-point program. Item 1, trends and themes in talent acquisition. Choose bootcamp format, prepare for change. 3, bootcamp workout, implement change. 4, bootcamp wind down, let go. 5, key takeouts.
Okay, so let's get into some of the content. I guess we're working in such an ever-changing dynamic environment at the moment, and we wanted to start setting some context around these by looking at some of the key themes that we're facing in the talent acquisition arena. So we're going to cover 2 topics under this area of themes. One is how the workforce fragmentation is forcing a rethink of how and where talent is actually acquired. And the second is this constant conversation that we're having about artificial intelligence and how it's becoming really embedded in the recruitment process. So those will set some of the context for the bootcamp where we'll talk about redesigning talent acquisition. So if we have a look at just how the workplace is changing and how our thinking is changing about getting work done, what we're seeing is this trend where workforce composition is really a function of dynamic change at this point. So organisations and individuals are having different expectations about what the workplace will look like in the future. So at one end, you have organisations that are under a huge amount of pressure to achieve great returns in an increasingly competitive and disruptive market. And labour still being one of the highest costs to any business, businesses are looking for flexible ways of being able to source their talent when and where they need it. Increasingly, that means looking at a mixed workforce of permanent workers, contingent workers, as well as augmenting human workers with technology such as AI and robotics, which we'll talk a lot more about. But interestingly, this actually aligns very well with shifting expectations that individuals have around what it means to work. People want more autonomy, they want balance in their work and lives, and they're looking to make greater contributions through their work endeavours. So in principle, we actually have a good alignment between what employers need from the workforce and what workers are looking for. But it's also creating some interesting challenges about the existing models we have of how and where talent is sourced, which introduces our first theme. So Phil, I know that you've got some ideas about how the workplace is changing and the demands of organisations and workers in their expectations. Do you have any opening comments in that regard?
Yeah, we've spoken a little bit about this earlier. Previously, everyone's talking about the future of work. There's a lot of hype about it, there's a lot of planning being put into it. There seems like there's no right or wrong answer, but we're listening to our people, we're listening to our suppliers, we're listening to our clients to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. What we hear in terms of some of the key themes is it's about greater workplace agility, flexibility and choice being the critical things, and there's a lot that flows from that.
Yeah, and this fragmentation of the workforce is forcing people to look differently at how they acquire talent. And on the screen at the moment, we have the outputs of this Harvard Business Review study, which shows that 94% of respondents to that study do believe that the organisations need their workforce to shift away from this traditional permanent employee bias that we've had in the industrial age. And the vast majority, 84% of them, also see that it's necessary to actually have a flexible workforce to be able to meet the financial goals of the organisation. Yet the majority, as we see, 58%, also note that there's some considerable obstacles to being able to achieve this flexible workforce. And it comes down to issues of silos within the organisation, collaboration, but also I think you've mentioned before to me that commercial viability of actually making this work is a bit of an issue.
Yeah, sure. And again, as I said, it's feedback from the people that we're hiring, get feedback from the market is certainly that there needs to be a shift in living infrastructure generally. So things like, how do you secure a home loan, benefits, insurances, if you're going to be working from home, you need to think about home office insurance, and firms and businesses need to think about that as well if the bulk of the workforce is going to be working outside the building. So that infrastructure is going to be key. I think there have been some developments. Certainly as a contractor or a long-term statement of work employee, you can get a home loan, but it's more difficult, and that's important to people, particularly entering the workforce, people in the first 10 years of employment.
So would you say that where the intent is there to start shifting to these new modes of working, the infrastructure that sits behind that and some of the expectations that we have as a broader society haven't quite caught up with that yet?
Yeah, in some areas we're seeing it, but I think overall there's still a way to go.
Okay, all right. So in the next component here, what we see is that there's also a fragmentation in terms of who's actually involved in the hiring process. Now, once upon a time, it all fell into the hands of HR. So if you needed to recruit people, you just went to HR. But what we're seeing increasingly as there's these different modes of work is that there's multiple stakeholders involved in the talent acquisition process. So HR may well be involved still in talent acquisition to fill job requisitions for permanent and part-time roles. But we see procurement coming in to manage external service providers and vendors. There might be a separate strategy function that's responsible for strategic alliances that bring specific types of expertise into the business. And then, of course, you have business unit managers and leaders out there directly hiring independent contractors, subject matter experts and consultants for specific projects. So consequently, this single point of talent acquisition has broadened out into quite a team of people that are fragmented across the business. And that's before we even consider the role of technology in all of this. How are you finding, Phil, the responsibilities of talent acquisition sort of spreading in organisations?
It certainly is, and I think the key challenge of any senior management of an organisation is to try and find a way to pull this together. I think we're on the learning curve, as probably most of you are. Procurement's definitely involved in the statement of work or the contracting type work or self-pricing type work. What we're seeing and what we're developing at the moment is that there definitely is a need for parent technology or overarching technology, and that technology will bring centralised data reporting and analytics, and that should drive headcount planning or hire planning as we go through the year-on-year planning process.
Great. So I think a lot of organisations are experiencing this and are starting to try to figure out how to pull the pieces together. And I think, what we've already talked about previously is that, this is very much a moving field at the moment. And there is no necessarily one right answer, but organisations really needing to work through how to figure it out for their particular environments. But you raised technology, and that brings us to our second theme. And that is really about how technology has evolved in this whole area of talent acquisition. So if we look at what's on screen at the moment, we've sort of moved through three waves of technology evolution. In the first wave, which probably goes back more than a decade now, we looked very much at getting efficiencies out of the technologies that we were bringing into talent acquisition. So a lot of that was about process automation. A lot of it was about getting a handle on, the numbers, the logistics around how many people we were hiring, where they were coming from, getting accurate reporting up and running, and with a business view of basically reducing the cost and time that it was taking to get people on board. In the second wave, which has been sort of more recently, the internal focus has gone very external. So rather than just focusing on efficiencies, we look at the effectiveness of the process, and that's really brought in the candidate experience. And this massive explosion of mobile and social technologies has meant that we've really put a targeted focus on what the employment experience is like for people. And so now we're moving into this third wave that we're currently in, where we're saying, having bedded down efficiencies, having looked at the external effectiveness of recruitment, how can we really get more strategic about it? How can we start to use our skills and technology to forecast, to do more effective workforce planning, to be more forward-focused, and use systematic and scientific processes that allow us to get a handle on predicting what we need in the future, rather than just responding to vacancies as we have in the past. So I think it's been a really fascinating transition over the last couple of decades, and I'm sure you've experienced that throughout your career already.
Absolutely.
So we actually have a stat here from Gartner that raises the expectation that by 2020, over 50% of talent acquisition apps will include some sort of AI or machine learning components. And so we're moving very fast now from these more static technologies that are reporting and automating process to ones that are really starting to get smart. And I think it's the smarts that people are really interested in now. And I know that you've been using some smart technologies. Let's just have a look at where Gartner predicts that this will become relevant in the talent acquisition process, and then I'll get you to comment on that too. So in terms of managing the talent demand and supply, we can see that AI really has a role to play throughout the whole recruitment cycle. So in everything from diversity and inclusion to creating smart candidate experiences, improving quality of hire, reducing the cost, reducing the time, and improving our overall efficiencies. And on this next slide, we can see some of the detail that sits behind that. Now, this one's a little bit busy, but we might pause on this one for a little while and just have a look at some of the areas in which AI can actually add value. And perhaps I'll get you to give us some examples of how at KPMG, Phil, you've used artificial intelligence and robotics in the different stages of the talent acquisition process here.
Sure. So we, about 18 months ago, following the market, we set about going out and asking our graduates that we hired what they enjoyed about the process, what was efficient, what was not efficient. We got lots of negative feedback as well as positive feedback, and realised that we needed to be faster to market, again about process automation. We needed to be faster to market and respond quicker to the grads, so that we could stay ahead of competitors who are all recruiting at the same period of time, and we do large volumes annually. So we decided to implement our first robotic process automation into our graduate hiring process. So we're in our second season now. The grad bot, which is called Sheila, the grad recruitment team named her, has assisted more than 20,000 permanent and graduate applicants so far. And Sheila's job is to constantly monitor applications, no matter what time of the day, where typically recruiters might have only reviewed each of their jobs once or twice a day to scrape for potential candidates. So she monitors applicants, sends them off to gamified assessments, which have AI built into the assessment process. The results of the assessments are then analysed. They then are categorised into different groups. The candidates, it's explained clearly to candidates that this is an automated process, that their CV won't be reviewed at that stage, that this is the first phase of automation, so it's very clear, no surprises, and we haven't had any negative feedback as a result. And they go through the assessment process. If successful there, they then send a video interview by the robot as well, by Sheila, and the video interview is completed. It then comes to the recruiter. So from 20,000 applicants, we get to somewhere like 15,000 applicants. In addition to that, we've also implemented another chatbot within our HR department, which answers FAQs essentially about HR policies, processes, procedures, and we're soon to implement that into the recruitment process as well and go to the external market. So we've done a bit of a trial internally first, which has been quite successful. With the intention of being able to answer queries, we get thousands of queries from students that have applied, as you can imagine, with 20,000 applications. So we're implementing a chatbot that's going to handle those queries moving forward. So we're still in the middle of it. We're all learning as we go, but the early stages, 18 months in, we're very positive about it.
And so how have you been able to understand what the candidate experience looks like and gather feedback on the experience they're having through this process?
So two things. We have basically a user survey that gets sent out, again, automated through the system at the end of the process, and we also run focus groups once they've joined us. We also send survey to candidates who have been through the process that have perhaps been declined through the process as well at different stages. So we're asking, we're responding, the results that we get, we're responding to those and making sure that we're making the changes we need to.
And what difference has it made to what your recruiters in the talent acquisition team are actually doing and what the experience is for them?
Well, the grad team are very happy that we have Sheila. What it's allowed them to do is spend far more time as their role is essentially a business partner to specific businesses, ideally talking about strategy, where the talent's going to come from, more diversified talent, hiring from more universities, from broader tertiary degrees, etc. So it's given them far more time to think about those strategic initiatives rather than pushing candidates through certain stages of the process, which are really manual, high volume, same process.
Yeah, which is, I guess, the benefit of these technologies is really elevating what the human involvement in the process is. So it's great to see that you're having some of those experiences. Are you seeing any downsides at this stage? Is there anything that you would point to as watch out for this for people considering using AI and chatbots?
I think initially we probably could have been clearer on what happens to their application. I think I mentioned that before, and we've changed the communications that we have, which go out through PageUp, through our ATS, that says this is what your experience will be throughout the process, and this is what you should expect. And since then, I haven't had anything. So it's being able to move and flex with that sort of feedback.
Okay, great. This has been a really great experience. All right, and what we're seeing in organisations is that the adoption of artificial intelligence is on the rise. So again, this Harvard Business Review study shows that respondents are now saying that the vast majority of them are looking to deploy decision-making tools and recommendation tools using AI. 66% of them are looking to deploy planning and process automation tools, and about 40% of them are looking to deploy virtual personal assistants and chatbots, as you have, Bill. So, Mary, I'm wondering whether at this stage it might be a good time to launch a poll and see how our audience is responding to the adoption of AI in their businesses. So here we have a poll question for all of you on the line to respond to. And we're asking, to what extent is your organisation currently considering tech-enabled innovation in your talent acquisition processes? So are you at the early stages where perhaps you're not at all thinking about it because the policies you've got internally or the technology platforms that you have just aren't nearly ready enough for that? Answer A. Perhaps you're somewhat along the way, discussing and exploring the opportunities but haven't quite got to implementation. Or C, perhaps like KPMG, very much along this path already and already using some AI or intend to do so in the very near future. If you can just register your votes on that, we'll gather that data and share it with you in a moment. Okay, so some interesting results coming in here, Phil. Are we allowed to share those now with our audience? Okay. What's your expectation, Phil? Would you expect that we'd be getting higher at the beginnings end or at the other end? That people are going to down the track?
I kind of expected the bulk would be in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's still very early days. There's still challenges with interfacing technologies and multiple technologies which are difficult to manage. Internal tech policies and procedures that have to be followed, particularly in the banks or financial services sector. Yeah. So all of those things contribute to make it a more difficult process.
Yeah, and I don't know that embryonic would be the right word to use for AI, but it's certainly in its early stages. I think in the next 3 to 5 years we'll see massive advances in this and much more standalone technology that will be able to do what we need it to do. But we're all still building it and figuring it out, so I think it is still early days. Looks like we've got a question there for you too, Phil. Who built Sheila?
So we did use an external provider for the tool itself, but we have an internal developer in our tech advisory function that has worked on it. In fact, was doing some tweaks to it just yesterday with the timing of the data that it operates and responds and things like that. So we have the ability to be able to modify internally now, which is great.
Yeah, so it's still very much an iterative process. Okay, well we should be seeing the results of that poll in a moment. Right, so 42% not having really started the process at all, 42% somewhat, and only 14% in that more advanced category. So, okay. I think that's probably where our expectations would have been.
Yeah.
And, I think that's why there's so much interest in this topic because, people are trying to work out how to build it into their organisations. Okay, well, we might move on into the bootcamp then. So as a backdrop against the themes that we've now discussed, the changing workforce dynamics and also the introduction of more advanced technologies, let's get into a bootcamp that looks at how HR and organisations are starting to prepare themselves to benefit from all of these changes. excuse me, and the bootcamp format really is in 3 stages. First of all, we do a warm-up, which, excuse me, got a problem with that. A warm-up, which allows us to think about how we actually need to prepare for change. So as you do with any physical workout, you first need to stop and think about what you need to achieve before you then go and implement that. So secondly, then we'll look at what actions actually need to be taken, and also some of the things we might consider to stop doing as part of that process. Okay, so I will run through what our best practices are showing as a warm-up process, Phil, and might just get you to comment on that then. So in the first instance, we need to prepare by warming up. So we need to stop, investigate and plan, and using evidence from our business environment and our organisational strategy, actually review our current approaches. So the first thing to do is really to map what the business needs, and this talks to the fact that every business is unique and every operating environment needs to find its own solution. So in terms of the organisation's external challenges and internal goals, being able to accurately forecast future talent needs in that environment is critical. And also understanding externally the target audiences in the labour market that you're looking to attract, who they are, where they are, and what sort of value proposition is going to attract them. So really understanding the environment that you're in. The second thing that we then talk about is looking at the talent acquisition process itself and seeing how well aligned that is to those business requirements. So we're recommending here that a really solid audit is done of your current status quo, which means scrutinising everything that exists to date, which means what does your employment brand look like? Is it aligned to that audience that you're trying to attract? The recruitment processes that you have, and how aligned they are to the technologies that you're using, and also your team capabilities, because I think you'll agree with me, Phil, the capabilities required in HR and talent acquisition are changing from what they used to be. The third component is to become a subject matter expert on talent acquisition, and that means researching all of the relevant data and facts about technology and process in the market. So talking to suppliers, networks, accessing analyst reports and research, reviewing case studies, attending conferences and seminars, really understanding what's out there that you could possibly bring into your talent acquisition redesign. And then finally, given that we've talked about a variety of stakeholders involved in this talent acquisition process, getting their buy-in and making sure that you've talked to everyone internally that will somehow be touched by how you redesign these processes. Phil, how did your team go about preparing, warming up for getting your talent acquisition processes to where they are right now?
Obviously driven by company performance and volumes, and we all have challenges with what is the ideal headcount, what does that headcount look like in the future, what will be the makeup of that headcount, to what we were talking about before, the fragmented nature of what the future workforce will look like. So the challenge there for recruiting functions is being able to flex up and flex down and removing some of those tasks that are same, which was done with the robotic process automation. In terms of business thinking, we do have our business thinking differently. So recruiters are out there partnering with their businesses, with our HR business partners as well, talking about headcount needs, core headcount needs, flexible headcount needs, what that could look like. Obviously, all the caveat though that in a client-facing environment or a revenue-generating environment, it's unpredictable, and that's right across our sector, financial services, and many others. So driven by that, so we are talking about what is core, what is flex, which is a different discussion to what we've had in the past, and making sure that we're having those hiring planning discussions earlier in the process as well. You mentioned HR skills for the future. Certainly in the recruitment space, we've looked at that as well. We see that there will be data analysts, data scientists, My team indicated that they wanted to learn some of the new skills of the future, and the HR 2020 skills of the future. We assessed them all on their emotional intelligence, for example, and so we've created some development programs to take them through expanding their skills and experience. For example, project management and process re-engineering, change management was something that the recruiter said, I think I'm going to need this in the future to be able to do my job effectively and to be able to work with the business, convince the business and take the business on a journey with them. So we put them through formal training, which would typically be our client-facing type roles in the firm, and they're now running projects and change management, process re-engineering projects, like implementing the chatbot, for example. So it's about thinking about what will it look like, how do we get them there, and making sure that we've got the right people to get there as well.
Yeah, and in the cliffhanger book that we published last year, Phil, we actually highlighted that one of the intelligences that HR generally needed to become a master of in future was digital intelligence, given the strategic nature of digital technology in a business going forward. So you're finding in your team that getting more digital savvy is also part of the criteria that they're working on?
Absolutely. And if I talk to my counterparts in other organisations, it's very clear that everyone has a strategy around or is pushing towards a strategy that's focused on the employee value proposition, the employer brand, what that looks like, and does that brand look different to different populations of people that are coming into the organisation? And we think it does. So if you're a contractor that only wants to work 3 months a year on a statement of work, the EVP looks very different to what it might be to a grad coming in. So we've actually redesigned our grad campaign, which is quite different. Last year it went live. So it's about listening to grads. So before it's about listening to what people want and what they need. The grad says they want to be able to come to us and either stay and become a partner in the future, or they want to come and get skills for 3 years and then go and be an entrepreneur and perhaps come back in the future. And we're okay with that. So we've changed our strategy and thinking around, okay, we expect that a population of people will come, work with us for a few years, and possibly come back in the future once they've done their own thing. So it's about listening and moving with expectations.
Yeah, and I think that's why this warm-up phase is so important, because really getting a handle on who you are as an organisation, what you have to offer, who the audience for those offerings are, becomes critical, and it's just not a one-size-fits-all scenario. So it really deserves some thorough thought. Mary, I'm wondering, again, what our audience is thinking in terms of their readiness in terms of this warm-up. So perhaps we can run our second poll.
Yes, I will just open the poll now, and to the question on how you vote, once I've opened the poll, you just click in the answer that's most relevant or resonates with you, and then we will see live on screen the results as we go.
Right, so the poll question being, how warmed up is your organisation for optimising the talent acquisition opportunities in the new world of work? So again, we're asking, well, A, is the answer to that not very ready at all. We need to start the warm-up process. B, somewhat ready. We know our gaps and opportunities, but need to do some work on implementation. And C, very much down the track of this, have a detailed roadmap and some new approaches, and we know what capabilities these require. Okay, so we're starting to see some results come in here. Okay, this is evolving kind of interesting. Well, nobody's saying that they've nailed it yet, Phil.
Somebody just said.
Okay. Yeah, and what's your take on this one? I think, this middle level, I think there is this level of awareness. People know that they need to be looking at it. They know they need to be investigating. They know they need to be asking the questions. And so we're kind of at this point of very attuned and acutely aware that we need to do these things. And what that then leads to is the challenge. 64% of people saying that they're somewhat down the track on that now.
It's one of the things that I overlay particularly see is, and you mentioned before, the various HR technologies. As we start to think more and more about this, there are more and more technologies on the market. There's a new app every day, and I get a phone call every day in terms of, can I review this app, or will this technology work? And being able to navigate through that to make decisions to get us to C in the poll is very difficult.
Yeah. On the one hand, you need a lot of information, but then once you start digging into it, there is so much of it that it can be quite overwhelming. So, I think it's a very important stage, and it leads us into the workout, which is the next component of that. So, having done that thinking and starting to do some analysis and investigation on what the organisation needs, we go with Bootcamp second section, which is the workout, actually implementing some of that change. Now, again, there's a few components to this. So the first being to actually develop a strategic plan. So taking all that analysis that's been done and engaging these functional stakeholders across the business to build a plan, including some timelines, some accountabilities, the measures, strategic outcomes and benefits, and to set progressive milestones and alerts and triggers to enable an agile adaptation, because it is an iterative process, and what we're finding is that no fixed strategic plan has a terribly long time frame at the moment, so you need something that is agile and iterative enough for it to manage the changes that are inevitable in the market. The second component, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier that you've done in one section of your process, Phil, is establish trials. Don't try to fix the entirety of the challenge in one shot, because change is pretty risky, and particularly when you're doing it significantly that impacts the whole organisation. So new process takes time to embed. New technology usually requires people to do some learning and unlearning. New skills and people are often quite likely to be required, and all of that puts huge change management load on individuals, the team, and many parts of the organisation. So a great way to tackle that is to start with a trial, often in areas that are ready for change and hungry to get involved. But often businesses do offline trials as well, so that they're not actually impacting the business directly. And finally, engaging the entire talent acquisition ecosystem. So refining the outcomes and engaging all players to implement this new plan once that's been established. And before I get you to comment on that, Phil, I'll just also mention some of the things that in that final workout stage. So in implementing some of these new initiatives, it's actually necessary to let go of some things, and we were quite strong on this in the panel work as well. And this can include things like actually reviewing your best practices and letting go of some of the things that you used to do. A lot of the processes that we came up with in the last decade have been quite complex, laborious processes, and we really need to put a litmus test to the value that they're adding. Administrative processes and reports that are actually adding value. So if you're producing reports that are really not much more than generating noise in the organisation or aren't necessary at all, these things can be eliminated, as well as actually looking at the types of technology that you've got and whether it's keeping up to date and able to integrate the new things that you need to. So there's a lot there in terms of what to do and what not to do. How's your thinking and your team approached some of this redesign work, Phil?
I would say overall very well. I think it's been mixed feedback from the team. Some people have really engaged with it and been empowered by it, and some haven't been. Some are probably more ready for change than others. So I think you need to expect that you have a broad range of people in your team, quite diverse backgrounds or experience. You definitely need to be managing the change process within first before you go outside to the business or to the external market. So that's key thing, particularly around technology, I found. So even people who are, straight out of university with a couple of years' experience in the millennial generation, who are very tech savvy, not all of them have engaged the technologies that we've put on the table. And I think the challenges there have been around the lack of interface or integration, where we've completely integrated certain technologies in our assessment process or our reference checking process or background checking process, where it's automated and easy. There's higher engagement, obviously, where you have to go out of the system and go into somewhere else. The uptake is not so great. Success has been good in those, but just not as good across the board from the team. So I think it's about understanding where people are at, where they are on the curve in terms of their readiness for change is critical. And then the trials that you mentioned before, we do it. We have a safe-to-fail environment. Everyone's comfortable that they can have ideas, and those ideas get discussed, talked about, planned, executed, and sometimes they succeed and sometimes they fail. And that's about driving a culture of innovation and giving people the trust and acceptance to be able to put those ideas on the table. So that's key. And one example of one of those that we're just about to go live with is we're going live with our first virtual internship, which is digital tech and innovation focused, which is obviously our big push as a firm. And we're going live with our first virtual internship this week, rather than have, and this is a bit of a change mindset with the business, rather than going out on campus to have many universities around Australia running 250 events a year. We've decided we're going to run 30 less events. We're going to run a virtual internship, which gives students from probably a much more diverse background, more diverse universities and degrees, access online to an internship that is real-time work that they might do as an intern or a graduate with us. So that's about listening to what students want. It's about addressing what we need in terms of building up our diversity culture and looking at talent pools from different places.
Yeah, it's a really interesting mix of responding to what your candidate market wants now, but also pushing forward and using some of the technologies and new approaches in order to achieve greater talent acquisition outcomes. Mary, run the final poll on where people are at in terms of redesigning their process. So, going to rate this time, how would you rate your organisation's progress towards redesigning talent acquisition? Rating of 1 is that you're well behind and need to address the urgency to remain competitive in the market for talent. Rating of 2 says you're doing okay with a significant way to go and need to fast-track implementation. And 3, feeling quite advanced and have implemented some new initiatives and you feel you're at the forefront of this next generation of talent acquisition. Let's see how you are feeling about this one. Okay. Right, so very interesting how these stats come about, isn't it? Go number 2. So I think, this again speaks to the fact that, people are aware that they need to be moving forward and that they are on the pathway, on the road to doing that. But also recognising that there's a way to go and I guess that's probably where we would expect for it to be sitting right now. And some organisations like yourself feel that they're already down this track a fair way and have implemented some of these things. So I'm sure they're very glad to hear some of your experiences as well. Any surprises out of that result for you?
No, I think you mentioned before, everyone knows what we need to do. How we get there is the challenge for everyone. My advice is we've set up a bit of a little tech review group. So every time a new tech comes in, we have a process that we flick the switch immediately and go through a process of reviewing, assessing, deciding whether it could be a possible fit for us and categorising them, possible, probable, and looking at potential barriers to being able to implement and how quickly we can implement them. That's the key thing. That we think that there's a lot of opportunity coming in the search engine space in terms of artificial intelligence and matching of candidates to jobs. And, obviously more to come with the big players like Microsoft and Google.
Excellent. Okay, so we might do a bit of a wrap-up and see if there's any other questions after that. So I might just sort of look at some key takeouts that we'd like to share with people in terms of affirmation. So the first one of those, okay, so the first one of those really relates to understanding the current situation. So we are recommending that people ask the hard questions and systematically take a hard line to what they're currently doing in their talent acquisition thinking and their practices. And there are, because there's talent acquisitions evolved over a long period of time, there are probably legacy practices, processes and technologies that really need to have a light shone on them to determine whether they're still adding value. So that would be one of the first takeout that we would have. I think we've also already come to the conclusion that don't feel bad if you don't have one right answer to this and don't expect to find it. I think, the way that KPMG has responded is very much specific to what your business is doing and where it's at in this cycle, and that different businesses will be at different points in those. So don't feel bad if you don't feel like a genius in this scenario. The third is that test and trial. Give things a go, see how they work, establish some measures around what's working and how it can be adapted, and be prepared to, as you say, feel safe to fail and try different things. And the fourth being that you need to move. So procrastination is not a strategy here, and what we do see is that organisations that are just hoping that this will go away will not be able to keep up with being competitive in the market for talent in the future. So the time is now to plan and act. Any other comments from you, Phil, in terms of takeouts or advice, recommendations that you would have based on your experience?
Look, it's an exciting time to be in talent acquisition. It's all about technology. There's a lot of talk about, as I said, there's a lot of new technologies. I would encourage you to be speaking to your counterparts in other similar organisations, which we do regularly in professional services, to make sure that we're all heading in a similar direction, or that we're sharing best practice. I wouldn't be scared off by anything that's being put out there. There's a lot of talk around artificial intelligence assessment. Has it really been resolved at this stage? Probably not. So we're really no one's missing out on anything at the moment. It's just a case of we need to keep talking, get our heads around it and determine what the best outcome is going to be. But it's all about opportunity, and we're very excited about it.
Yeah, as are we. And it's been great to have this conversation with you today, Phil. Thank you so much for being part of it. And I'll hand back to you, Marion.
Thank you.
Thank you both. So for those of you who don't know who PageUp is a global talent management software as a service provider, helping organizations strategically align their talent resources across borders, business units, cultures, and languages. The key to executing on a technology strategy is the ability to have choice on the tools required when required. PageUp has delivered on this strategy for many organizations globally, including KPMG. So what next? This completes today's bootcamp on redesigning talent acquisition. Our next bootcamp, Redesigning Performance Management, will be held on Wednesday, the 9th of May. Our guest speaker will be Daniel Rodello from Transdev, who will share some insights on his global organization and how they have implemented performance. We would like to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I will be sending out copies of the presentation and the slides to you all. You will also be able to share this with your colleagues. If anybody has any questions or would like any further information, please don't hesitate to reach out to either myself or anyone within the PageUp team. Again, thank you and have a great day.